We just heard a true crime story, a tale of murder, of manipulation, of greed and ambition and corruption. It was a story of King Ahab and Jezebel and the prophet Elijah. It's found in 1 Kings in the Bible. Hi, I'm Matt, and I'm glad you're with us today as we are in our series called True Crimes, as we're looking at these stories from the scriptures and how they can give us warnings for today and how they can bring us insight for our lives. So I'm glad you're with us today. As we look at the story of Ahab and Jezebel and Elijah, it's not very pretty. In fact, it's very corrupt and it's very evil, and it rivals kind of the true crime stories you might hear on one of those podcasts or TV shows. And 1 Kings chapter 16, it says this: In the 38th year of Asa, king of Judah, Ahab, son of Omri, became the king of Israel. And he reigned in Samaria over Israel 22 years. Ahab, son of Omri, did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any of those before him. He not only considered it trivial to commit the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, but he also married Jezebel, daughter of the Ebath king of the Sidonians. And he began to serve Baal and worship him. He set up an altar for Baal in the temple of Baal that he built in Samaria. And Ahab also made an Asherah pole and did more to arouse the anger of the Lord, the God of Israel, than any of the kings of Israel before him. See, here we have the worst of the worst. Ahab, he did more to arouse anger in God than any of the other kings. He did more evil in the sight of the Lord than any of these other kings. He married Jezebel, and she is this follower of Baal, and they built temples and they began to worship Baal. They set up this pole to this Canaanite goddess, and it continues to point people away from God. Ahab is this evil overlord, but at the same time, he's not known for his decision making. In fact, he's kind of known for being indecisive. And so as he marries Jezebel, she is just full of greed and ambition, and she's just not sitting on the side of him as his queen. She is an active participant, and she begins to push her agenda on the whole nation. And she is, one of her biggest things is to wipe out the things of God from the past of Israel, not just to change and offer a new religious option, but to really wipe that out so that everyone will follow Baal. And this is her main desire, and this really made Elijah upset. Elijah, he's a prophet of Yahweh, the one true God, and he is determined to bring Ahab and Jezebel to justice for all of the evil and for trying to turn the nation away from Yahweh, from God. And so he goes to them and to prophesize against them, to condemn them. And here's what we see in 1 Kings chapter 17. It says, Now Elijah, the Tishbite from Tishbe in Gilead, said to Ahab, As the Lord, the God of Israel lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew or rain in the next few years except at my word. So he comes to them and he condemns them. He says, you're turning away from God. And because of this, God came to tell me that there will be no rain. There's going to be a drought until I come back. And so do they heed his warning? No. This makes them even more angry. Elijah then has to go on the run for his life because Jezebel makes it her mission to take out all of the followers, all of these prophets of Yahweh, all the prophets of God. So she sets up this militia of bounty hunters, and she travels over all the territories trying to hunt down Elijah and all of these other prophets. And so Elijah is on the run. For 3 years this goes on, and she is going around committing all of this murder. And after a long time, here's what it says in 1 Kings 18. After a long time, in the 3rd year, the word of the Lord came to Elijah. Go and present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain to the land. So Elijah went to present himself to Ahab. Now the famine was severe in Samaria. There's no rain, and so there's no food. There's drought. There's famine. And so the nation is struggling, just like Elijah warned them it would happen that way. So he goes to Ahab to challenge him once again. At this point, Jezebel is out doing her bounty hunting, going down and hunting and murdering these prophets. And so Elijah has just to face Ahab. So here's what it says in 1 Kings 18. So Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him. And Ahab went to meet Elijah. And when he saw Elijah, he said to him, "Is that you, you troubler of Israel?" "I have not made trouble for Israel," Elijah replied, "but you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands, and you have followed Baal. Now summon the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel, and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table." So Elijah comes to condemn Ahab again. God says, "Go and meet with Ahab, and I will bring rain back." But as he goes, he condemns him, and he ends up challenging him to a duel, in a sense, almost like the showdown at the OK Corral. He says, "Bring all your prophets, and let's duke this thing out." And so here's what happens. 1 Kings 18, verse 20 continues. So Ahab sent word throughout all of Israel and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Elijah went before the people and said, "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him." But the people said nothing. So then Elijah said to them, I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets. So Elijah sets up this duel in order to help people see that God is the true God. And so he lays it out. They put this sacrifice on Mount Carmel, and what he says to them is that if you can call down to Baal, if pray to Baal and call down fire upon this sacrifice, then we'll know that your God is real. And so what happens is they pray from morning to noon, hours and hours. They're calling and praying to Baal, but nothing happens. Verse 26, it says this: "Baal, answer us," they shouted. But there was no response. No one answered. They all danced around the altar that they had made, and at noon, Elijah began to taunt them. "Shout louder," he says. "Surely he's God. Perhaps he's deep in thought or busy or traveling. Maybe he's sleeping and must be awakened." So nothing is happening. Elijah starts taunting them. This goes on all afternoon. They're crying out to Baal. Nothing happens. And then it comes to this point in late afternoon when Elijah's had enough. And now it's his turn. So he takes 12 stones and puts them around this altar, around this sacrifice. The 12 stones represent the 12 tribes of Israel. And then they dig a trench around the sacrifice as well. And then Elijah takes it up a notch. He says, "Get those large basins, fill them with water, and dump them all over the sacrifice." And so they dump water all over the sacrifice. And then he says, "Do it again." And they fill them with water, and they dump it over again. And he goes, "Do it again." And then again, they just totally drench the sacrifice, so much so that the trench is full with water as well. And then here's what happens. At the time of the sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, "Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant. I have done all the things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so that these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again." Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil. It also licked up all of the water in the trench. And when all the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried, "The Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God." Then Elijah commanded them, "Seize the prophets of Baal, and don't let any of them get away." And they seized them, and Elijah brought them down to the Kishon Valley, and they slaughtered them there. And Elijah said to Ahab, "Go and eat and drink, for there is the sound of heavy rain." And so Ahab went off to eat and drink, but Elijah climbed to the top of Mount Carmel, bent down to the ground, and put his face between his knees. And there he began to pray. And it says that as he prays, asking God to fulfill his promise of rain for the land, a cloud forms and the rain comes. Now, I just want to say this. The story of Elijah, there are a lot of wild things when it comes to the story of Elijah. And if you were like, "I don't know if that's true," like I understand that. It takes faith to believe these things. when I look at some of these things in the story of Elijah, it makes me question my own faith. Like I haven't, like he experiences the power of God in so many amazing and wild ways. This makes me wonder, like, am I holding God back? Am I holding back His power in my life? Is my lack of faith? Is it just holding God's power back for what I could experience? Well, back to the story. What we see is that Ahab eventually runs off to go tell Jezebel all that had happened. And what we see with Ahab is that sometimes he seems remorseful. Sometimes it's like, is he going to turn back to God? Like he's seen this, but he's always so indecisive. And so he meets up with Jezebel, and she just continues to push him in the wrong direction. And Jezebel, again, doesn't heed the warnings of God. Ahab doesn't heed the warnings of God that he is the real God, just like Elijah proved with his showdown at Mount Carmel. Instead, this makes Jezebel even more determined, even more ambition, even more evil. And she promises to hunt down Elijah and to kill him. So Elijah is back on the run again. And this leads us to maybe one of the most evil acts that we see in the story of Jezebel and Ahab. Ahab wanted to have this vineyard, this property of land that was next to one of their temples. And it was owned by this guy named Naboth. And Ahab goes to him and he tries to negotiate, but he doesn't want to sell it. So he comes back to Jezebel, and he's telling her about it, and she's like, well, why don't you just take it? Like, you're the king. And so what she does is that she orchestrates this whole plan, this whole evil plot to have Naboth falsely accused of treason and blasphemy. And then she manipulates all of the officials, and she turns the law into a weapon for her own gain. Naboth ends up being stoned to death. And then Ahab seizes this vineyard. And this crime that they commit, it's like they have no remorse. It's just swift and ruthless and cold-hearted. And Jezebel made sure that no one ever stood in her way. Not the prophets, not Naboth. It was all about her evil desires. The only one that stood in her way was God and Elijah. And when Elijah heard this news, and he just burned with holy anger and longing for justice. And so he once again went to confront Ahab. 1 Kings 21, it says this. Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah. Go down to meet Ahab, king of Israel, who rules in Samaria. Now he is now in Naboth's vineyard, where he has gone to take possession of it. And say to him, this is what the Lord says. Have you not murdered a man and seized his property? Then say to him, this is what the Lord says. In the place where the dogs licked up Naboth's blood, the dogs will lick up your blood. Yes, yours. Elijah goes on to prophesy about Jezebel's death too, that she will actually be devoured by dogs. And what we see is this prophecy comes to a swift conclusion. And what happens is Ahab he's out in battle, and a stray arrow ends up striking him dead. And they take his chariot back, and as they're cleaning it out, the dogs come and lick up his blood in that same spot where Naboth was stoned, just like Elijah told them it would. Soon after that, the kingdom's all in a mess because of Ahab's death. Jezebel gets into a scuffle with some of her servants, and they end up throwing her out a balcony window. And she falls to her death as she's trampled by horses, and the dogs come and actually devour her, just like Elijah said. This was a gruesome death, but in one way, a fitting death for the evil of these two. And the prophecy of destruction was foretold, and it happened just as it was prophesied. The story of Ahab and Jezebel, it's a violent story, it's a true crime story, and it serves as a reminder for us that absolute power can corrupt absolutely, how ambition can blind people to the needs of others, it can lead to suffering of others, and how even the highest rulers can face consequences for their crimes. This kingdom that once stood strong was shattered because of the greed and the corruption of these two. How their thirst for control would one day be their undoing. This is a cautionary tale that still has implications for us today. See, Ahab was this king that let evil be his direction. And there was these times when he seemed remorseful and it seemed like he might turn back to God. But Jezebel would always speak into his life and point him in the wrong direction. The question is, do you have influences in your life that are pointing you in the wrong direction? Maybe it's what you listen to or what you watch, or maybe it's somebody, and they're always pushing you in the wrong way. It says this in 1 Corinthians 15. It says, don't be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. Proverbs 3 says this, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight. Don't be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and shun evil. This will bring health to your body, nourishment to your bones. Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of your crop. Then your barns will be filled with overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. Here we see the challenges to trust in the Lord with all of your heart, to lean on his understanding, to not let bad company corrupt, to not just trust in our own ways, but to lean on God so that he can guide us. You know, we have his spirit within us, and the question is, will we listen to him? What we see is time and time again, Ahab and Jezebel didn't. They let their evil desires and their greed point them in the wrong direction. Now, you might not be a psycho killer like Jezebel, but if we're honest, we can often let pride, we can also let our greed, we can often let our own desires point us in the wrong way. We might not have a kingdom like Ahab, but we have the kingdom of our hearts and our lives. And the question is, who sits on the throne of your heart? Is it your own evil desires? Is it your own greed? Is it your own ambition? Are you the king of your heart? Or will you trust in God and not lean on your own understanding? Will you humble yourself and make him the king of our hearts? It says this in James chapter 4. God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble. Submit yourself then to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee to you. Come near to God, and he will come near to you. Wash your hands, you sinners. Purify your hearts, you double-minded. Grieve, mourn, and wail. Change your laughter to mourning, your joy to gloom, and humble yourself before the Lord, and he will lift you up. Humble yourself before God. Don't be prideful, ambitious, greedy like Jezebel. Humble yourself before the Lord. See, this story isn't just about Ahab and Jezebel. It's really about the whole nation of Israel. We see this pattern throughout the Old Testament where they turn from God, they don't take it seriously, they let other influences in their life, and then they suffer the consequences. Suffering, wars, exile, bad leaders, and eventually the nation of Israel would turn back. But they had so many opportunities from these prophets of God, people speaking into their life, trying to warn them and point them in the same direction. I think our life can be much like that too. We can end up going in the wrong direction. We can end up facing decisions we have to make. And will we listen to God and heed his warnings? Will we trust in him with all of our heart? You know, we have his words that we can listen to. We have his spirit in us if we are a follower of Jesus. A spirit there to guide us. His word is there to be like guardrails for our life so we don't crash and burn. Will we listen to him? Proverbs chapter 8 says this, now then, my children, listen to me. Blessed are those who keep my ways. Listen to my instruction and be wise. Don't disregard it. Blessed are those who listen to me, who watch daily at my door, waiting at my doorway. For those who find me find life and receive favor from the Lord. But those who fail to find me harm themselves. Hebrews 12 says, don't turn a deaf ear to these gracious words. If those who ignored earthly warnings didn't get away with it, what will happen to us if we turn our backs on heavenly warnings? Elijah was this prophet who was warning Ahab and Jezebel and all the people to turn back to God, to trust in him with all their heart, to make him the king of their hearts. We see today that we have his words in the scriptures. We have his spirit within us. And will we listen? Will we listen to God? You might have big evil desires like Ahab and Jezebel, but the reality is that we all have choices we make every day for the direction of our life. And a series of small choices can get us so off track. That's really what happened with the nation of Israel. Small choices end up being big consequences. The same is true for our life. Will we listen to God? Will we heed his warning? Will we let him be the influence? Will we not let bad company corrupt? Will we humble ourselves and put our trust in him? Let's evaluate the patterns of our life. Let's consider the patterns in our lives. Let's not get off track. Let's listen to God's warnings, listen to his ways. And if you are off track, I want you to know this. Remember this, that no matter what crimes you've committed against God, he still loves you the same, and you can always turn back.